Good morning. So yesterday we spoke about how we all want to abide in happiness, live free of problems and difficulties. Now, and also addressed there that the most effective method to achieve that is to transform our way of thinking, to radically transform our way of thinking. And so when looking at the first verse, we saw there that the method to transform our way of thinking starts by looking at our relationship with others, transforming how we think about others, coming to recognize our interdependent relationship with them, how deeply connected we are with all beings, and recognize the great benefit that they bring to us, the kindness that beings show us, and the benefit from the various activities that we achieve. And then starting there, recognizing then also at a deeper level, we are all the same in wanting to be free from suffering and abide in happiness. And we use that recognition that we generate after developing a sense of closeness to others to express the wish, may all beings without exception abide in happiness. And this is the mind of love. And may all beings be free from all problems and difficulties. This is the mind of compassion. And we develop these two, love and compassion, further to the point where we're not satisfied with this mere wish. Even though it's strong within us, we take responsibility to ensure that all beings actually develop their mind to the point where they do abide in happiness and are free from suffering. And we take that as our responsibility, and to fulfill that responsibility, we commit to becoming a Buddha for the sake of others. This then is the mind of bodhicitta. So we saw yesterday in the first verse that the generation of bodhicitta, the cause that will lead to one becoming a Buddha, the attainment of Buddhahood, comes about in dependence on all sentient beings. Therefore, sentient beings are of greater value than a wish-fulfilling gem. Sentient beings, as the basis for us to transform our way of thinking, or the object towards whom we transform our way of thinking, they are of greater value than any material wealth or prestige or power or influence. They are of greater value than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So this meditation that was presented yesterday is one of extreme importance. And for it to radically transform oneself, one needs to engage in this meditation repeatedly over a sustained period, thereby slowly transforming how we naturally relate to others, relating to others with genuine love and compassion. And thereafter, in the second verse, we looked at the need to, at all times, wherever we are, whomever we are with, to be on guard against the arisal of pride, this inflated sense of self-worth that leads to which is an attitude of condescension, where one looks down on others. This mind of pride which is contrary to holding others as dear, to valuing others. So at all times, whomever we are with, in whatever circumstance, remind yourself that whomever you are with, they have qualities that exceed our own. They know things that we do not. And by reminding oneself of that, one guards oneself against pride, and it enables or aids our development of the recognition of our interdependence with others and the kindness and benefit we receive from them. So now we'll continue where we concluded yesterday. And here the verse encourages us to look at our mind at all times, particularly to take care of our motivation, our intention behind our physical actions, our verbal actions, and our very way of thinking. So the third verse, and from here I'm just going to change the translation of the final line for all the verses in light of what Geshe's commentary yesterday. In all actions I will examine my own mind, and the moment an affliction arises, since it endangers others and myself, may I forcefully confront and avert it. Looking at the first line, in all actions I will examine my own mind. So this term translated as all actions, more literally is paths of conduct. The meaning is what we had in the first line in the preceding verse. Wherever we are, at whatever time and whomever we are with, at such times. So in other words, whether we are doing something physically, whether we are engaging in verbal action, or merely just quietly thinking. At all times, one must examine my own mind, in particular here, one's motivation. So what one is explicitly looking for in one's motivation is the presence of the afflictions. So whether what we spoke about yesterday, the pride is present, perhaps pride when we are talking to others or doing something in the presence of others, otherwise perhaps attachment or anger, any kind of afflicted mind. This is what we need to be on the lookout for. This is what we are examining to see whether the afflictions are present or not. Afflictions, one needs to be on guard against these afflictions because they are the source of harm. They harm ourselves, and through their expression, they bring harm to others. Therefore, when we need to be on the lookout for them and stop them, eliminate them whenever we become aware of them. For example, we spoke about pride yesterday. So when we notice that we have a condescending attitude towards others, inflating ourselves, then immediately we need to apply the antidotes and eliminate pride. In all actions, I'll examine my own mind, and the moment an affliction arises. So here one is on the lookout for any type of affliction, and also in terms of any strength, whether it's aversion or anger, whether it's attachment, pride, or competitiveness, whatever it may be, it must be eliminated. And the reason for that is in the third line, since it endangers others and myself. The very cause of our suffering are these afflictions. Their arisal within us serves to harm us, and their expression through our speech or our behavior brings harm to others. To have the commitment to constantly be examining one's mind for the afflictions, and to have the conviction that afflictions are never to be justified and in all circumstances, and even when afflictions are slight, they are to be eliminated. To have such conviction requires one to come to deeply recognize the faults of the afflictions. This is imperative. Otherwise, it's all too easy to ignore slight afflictions or to justify them. So one needs to recognize that the mere arisal of an affliction disturbs one's peace of mind, takes one's mind away from virtue, and one loses one's own inner peace. Moreover, when one expresses an affliction, for example, through talking unkindly to someone or about them, we by the expression of this affliction, we express our own unhappiness, our own unhappy, dissatisfied mind. And in this way, we disturb the peace of others. And in particular, if we speak in a harsh manner directly towards someone, they are likely to get hurt by what we are saying. And in fact, they may have their own afflicted response. They may well lash out in kind, and then conflict comes. Now, our own lack of peace of mind that came from the arisal of the affliction, having expressed it, and the other person responding in kind, now we become even unhappier. So the point to come to is to recognize that afflictions only lead to suffering for oneself and others. And in particular this, that there is no benefit from the arisal and the abiding, nor the expression of the afflictions. So as mentioned yesterday, when anger arises within oneself and one expresses it, this just causes harm to others. But if one only looks at it from a self-centered perspective, what benefit do I get from expressing anger? Then yes, certainly, there can well be some short-term benefit. In particular, if you have a relationship of power or dominance or authority over the person to whom you are expressing your anger, then they may end up acting in accordance with your wishes, and then you can say to yourself, yes, that anger got what I wanted, therefore it was justified. But if one thinks just a little deeper, in terms of the harm to that person, the harm to your relationship with this person, you see there is really no benefit that comes from anger. And then in terms of the karmic consequences that will follow in lives to come, only suffering can come from anger. So one needs to challenge this perspective, the self-centered perspective, that some benefit can come from the afflictions. Because yes, looking at it on a very superficial, self-centered perspective, some benefit can be found. But that is very short term. The longer term, only suffering will follow, as well as harm to others. So this reflection is imperative, so as to come to recognize that the cause of suffering is the afflictions. And not wanting to suffer, I need to eradicate the cause. It's through eradicating the cause, namely the afflictions, I will gain freedom from suffering. Anger, and again, just to say this word anger, we should understand on a spectrum, so from frustration and annoyance all the way to rage and hatred. So all are included in the term anger. So anger is not such a frequent mind that arises, and its harm is also much more evident than other afflictions. So whilst it's fairly easy in certain circumstances to justify anger, it is still, the harm is much more evident than other afflictions, particularly when compared to that of attachment. Attachment arises very frequently and is very easy to justify. It's not always so easy to see the faults of attachment. Attachment arises in relation to so many things. Things that we see and like, attachment arises. We hear something pleasant, a nice music, a nice sound, attachment arises. Smell a lovely fragrance, taste something, touch something, a nice piece of fabric, attachment arises so easily. We see someone we like, attachment arises. Our own body, there is attachment towards our own body. We're very concerned about what others think about us and so forth. We have this attachment to our body too. Then also towards our various skills and talents, we have attachment. And one of the additional faults of attachment is it is often a source from which other afflictions arise, such as pride. For example, when we are attached to our various qualities, our talents and skills, then pride in relation to those skills will follow from attachment. We also will be attached to our reputation, what others think about us, our status. And we'll be attached to our various material possessions. So attachment is a difficult affliction to deal with because it arises so easily and we are so used to it. To actually recognize how often it arises and how easily it arises takes constant investigation, constant examining of our mind. Because it arises so easily in terms of the sense objects, things we see and smell and so forth, as well as towards our own qualities. It's difficult to recognize and very easy to justify. So attachment is an affliction we need to really be on guard against because it is difficult to recognize just how pervasive it is. And it's also an affliction that is very easy to justify. So part of coming to recognize the faults of attachment is to see its role in the arisal of other afflictions we can more easily recognize as harmful. So from attachment, pride easily arises. Pride in relation to our physique, our status, our skills and talents and so forth. Also, from attachment, competitiveness and jealousy can easily arise, wanting to do better than others because of attachment again to our own status and so forth. And when our attachment to perhaps views, to getting our own way and so forth, is not fulfilled, then frustration, annoyance will arise. When things aren't going the way we want them to, our attachment is not being fulfilled, annoyance, frustration, maybe anger arises. And certainly in relation to others, when they have different views from us, different opinions from us, from our attachment not being fulfilled, anger can arise so easily. Looking through the entire verse, in all actions, so everything that we do, whether it's physical conduct or verbal conduct, whatever we may do, examine the motivating mind behind that. And what you are looking for is the presence of afflictions. And if you find them, then one must forcefully confront and avert them. And one first forcefully confronts and averts afflictions, and one replaces them with opposite minds, wholesome minds. So afflictions or unwholesome minds need to be averted, and wholesome minds, virtuous minds, need to be cultivated. So what we are being encouraged to do here is, before embarking on any activity, speaking to someone or doing something, watch one's mind. And moreover, whilst engaging in that activity, keep examining your mind. And if you notice an affliction, immediately remind yourself of the faults of the afflictions, that they are the cause of suffering for myself and others. They cause suffering now, they cause suffering in lives to come. And in this way, avert the affliction, confront and avert it, and replace it with a wholesome way of thinking. Rather generate a mind such as valuing others, wanting them to be happy, wanting them to be free of problems. Open your heart to them. And in this way, those that you are interacting with, you will be emotionally holding them close, caring for them. And your mind then will be free of affliction. So doing so is strengthening your habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking is a way to have a healthy mind. Through that, we know there's a physical impact. Through having a healthy mind, a virtuous mind, one also has a healthy body. Moreover, if one's mind is afflicted, one is deeply unhappy, this not only causes one's mind to be unhappy, but has a negative impact on one's body. So an analogy I often use is, if you think of a car can only travel to a destination if the driver decides on that destination and then embarks and continues on the journey to that destination. So similarly, our mind can be controlled. And by controlling our mind as the driver, we control the resulting physical and verbal behavior, which is likened to the car. So if we ensure our mind is wholesome and virtuous, then what we say, what we do, will bring benefit in the short term and in the long term as well. So therefore, we need to go through this chain of reflection, coming to the point of recognizing that the afflictions only cause harm, but not leave it at that, but recognizing the contrary minds, the wholesome minds, are virtuous and required, and they have them as dominance within us. And when we ever notice an affliction arise, as it says in the fourth line, may I forcefully confront and avert it. Here I encourage you to really come to look and come to recognize the primacy of mind, to recognize that our physical behavior as well as our speech, has no freedom on its own. So take the body. Whether the body came here this morning depended on whether you set the intention. I will do so, and not merely set the intention, but made yourself do so. Likewise, when you came here and decided to sit, this required intention. I'm going to sit, and then I will sit, and your body then does as it is told. And likewise, if one is going to look at something, or read something, one is going to listen to something, this only comes through the mind instructing the body to do so. And so too with speech. So why this is important to recognize is to see the primacy of mind, the primacy of mind over the body and speech. Therefore, by taking care of our motivation, examining our motivation, ensuring it is virtuous, we know that our physical behavior, our speech, will then be wholesome, will be virtuous. And the final point you see at the end of the first line, it says, my own mind. So this is where our focus is here. In all actions, I'll examine my own mind. And what are we examining for? Afflictions. And at the moment that we recognize an affliction, knowing that it's harmful, that it endangers others and myself, may I forcefully confront and avert it. And to differing degrees of eradication that one can apply oneself to, and that depends on the antidote used. The most powerful of all the wholesome minds, the antidotes, is that of the wisdom realizing selflessness, or the wisdom realizing emptiness. It is able to eradicate the afflictions entirely. whereas the wisdom realizing emptiness is the ultimate or the supreme antidote. There are many temporary antidotes which are much easier to apply. They still require extensive training, but if we take the antidote to anger, this is love and compassion. So to the extent one develops love and compassion, anger will not arise. In terms of attachment, there the temporary antidote is to gain a more realistic perspective of what we are attached to. Because the mind of attachment exaggerates the desirable qualities of what we are attached to. So our mind is not in accordance with reality. So if we intentionally remind ourselves of the faults of what we are attached to, our attachment will subside because we are now getting a far more balanced perspective. So if one is struggling with attachment to food, there are often sweet food that we are very attached to, like delicious cake. So if one wants to deal with one's mind, and one will look out for the arisal of attachment, and when one sees the attachment arise in relation to the cake, then one needs to remind oneself of the fault of eating the cake. Remind oneself of the ingredients and the effects those ingredients have on the body, the sugar and the fats and so forth. And ask yourself, do I really want that? Likewise, that by following my attachment in terms of my mind, I will strengthen this habituation to following attachment. My attachment will become ever stronger, and therefore the negative results that follow from attachment will come more frequently. So whilst there is some benefit, because we're trying to get a balanced perspective here, whilst there is some benefit to eating cake in that it tastes nice, the faults far outweigh the benefits. Here now, the attachment is reduced because one is looking at what one desires in a more realistic light. And likewise with alcohol, there one recognizes that yes, there are some benefits to drinking alcohol. It tastes nice. It relaxes the mind. But the faults are greater. I come to rely on something to relax my mind, to deal with the stress, something that is not a particularly skillful technique to deal with my mind. Moreover, alcohol contains a lot of sugar. This too causes harm to my body. Also, if I have a little too much, then I may say or do things I later regret, and I may even harm my relationships. So what's being said here is realistic, both in relation to the cake and the alcohol. It is entirely realistic. And this, looking then at what we desire in a more realistic manner, serves to reduce the strength of our attachment. Likewise, if you're thinking to buy something, in particular if it's something quite expensive, maybe there's a bit of status attached to it, there, when attachment arises, particularly if it's strong, you'll be thinking about this a lot. It will dominate your thoughts. There, it's very clear, I have strong attachment, I need to deal with this. So yeah, you remind yourself of, yes, there are some benefits to possessing this, but it's expensive. Do I really need to spend that kind of money on it? It will also not last. It will not stay shiny and new, but it will become old and marked quite quickly. And it is unlikely to be as useful as I expect. Moreover, so thereby one is looking at whatever one desires in a more balanced perspective. This serves to reduce the attachment. Then it's also very skillful, having recognized attachment, to look at the faults of that affliction. And as mentioned earlier, so you remind yourself of the faults of remaining attached to things, remaining deceived and guided by one's attachment, how it harms myself now and through these causes in lives to come, how the expression of attachment, maybe not necessarily in this instance, but by remaining dominated by attachment, how it does lead to causing harm in the lives of others. And in this way, becoming averse to attachment, that also attachment in general will serve to reduce our attachment to this particular item. For example, if one's looking at a new phone, the new one has been released and it looks quite wonderful. The advertisers are doing a good job at marketing all its wonderful new features. Ask yourself, do I really need a flagship phone? Do I really need something that expensive? When I look at what I use my phone for, do I need all these things that these phones can do? When I look at how I use my current phone, do I use all of these features? Or would just an average run-of-the-mill phone not do just as well? So this is just a simple illustration. It's easy to understand. But the idea throughout these examples is the same. You come to a more balanced perspective at what you desire, and that will calm the mind. And ideally, too, look at the faults of the affliction. And a further common antidote to apply is when one's mind is full of discursive thought. The mind just isn't keeping quiet, but is busy. Then watch the breath, calm the mind. Do it for a few minutes, calm the mind. So this helps with an overly active mind. But whilst it feels good and it's much nicer to live with a calmer mind, don't leave it at that. Having calmed the mind, then cultivate a mind of actual value, such as love and compassion and so forth. So watching the breath is very effective to calm the mind. But unless one is specifically training to develop calm abiding, rather use now this calmer mind to cultivate a far more useful, virtuous mind, such as love or compassion. So these then are some illustrations of antidotes to the afflictions, so temporary antidotes that will help reduce the afflictions when one notices that they have arisen. To have the strength of mind to confront and avert afflictions and be on the outlook for them, it's imperative to recognize their faults and to recognize how they arise. When one has some skill in dealing with the mind in this way, then one can come to try to apply the ultimate antidote, the most effective antidote, that of the wisdom realizing selflessness. Yesterday, I quoted a couple of verses from the first chapter of Shantideva's Engage in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Now I'll quote a further verse, the 28th verse, wherein he points out that whilst beings don't want to suffer, they remain ignorant or confused about what causes them to suffer. And whilst beings want to be happy, they remain ignorant or confused about what causes happiness. And thereby, beings continue to make wrong decisions and go down the wrong path, not the path that leads to lasting happiness, but to continued suffering. So the 28th verse from the first chapter. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. Though longing for happiness in their confused ignorance, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So look at the first two lines. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. So recognizing that ourselves as well as others long to be rid of suffering, this is very clear. No one encounters suffering and is delighted. We do not want to suffer. No one wants problems. No one wants difficulties. Yet, how we respond to unwanted circumstances all too often makes our situation worse. Very seldom do we genuinely respond in a skillful manner. So, for example, if someone acts towards us in an unwanted manner, usually this would be they speaking unkindly to us or about us, or they're doing something against our wishes. All too often, we respond in an afflicted manner. The skillful response is having long trained in patience. Our mind will stay undisturbed by what they are saying or doing. Our mind will remain open and relaxed. Then we can respond skillfully with minds of love, compassion, and wisdom. This is how a skillful practitioner responds to harm. But this is not so common. All too often, when things do not go how we want, either if someone's acting towards us in a particular way, or we're having our own normal inner turmoil, or outer circumstances we do not like, we respond with our afflictions. We insist we want things to be the way that we want them to be. And when others disagree, we argue with them. We may even then have a long-going dispute with them, insisting our way is right. And this could even lead to hating someone and decades of dislike towards someone. Every time you think of them in a negative way. And with those who have power, leaders of countries, they in order to have things go their way, may well command their military to start a war. And from all of this action, from the extreme end of warfare, right the way through to insisting on our own way, this is not skillful. It just leads to conflict. It just leads to unhappiness, and it just leads to a perpetuation of unskillful ways to deal with situations. Another source of conflict is when we are wanting to do something and someone else is an obstacle to us doing that or doing it in the way that we want. So this could be at our place of work, it could just be in traffic on the road. And when someone impedes what we are wanting to do, invariably our response is one of afflictions. We respond perhaps just with getting annoyed, or we respond with expressing that. We get aggressive, or we get insistent. I want it like this, you must change. So here, the mistake that is being made is not necessarily that one is responding or one is trying to resolve the situation. That is not necessarily the fault. The fault is that the mind is afflicted. Therefore, the way one is responding is necessarily unskillful. Whatever the result is, whether you get your own way and it works out for the better or not, one's method was unskillful because it was afflicted. So therefore, if one responds with anger, one responds with aggression or insisting on one's own way, that method is at fault. Rather, one should respond with a patient attitude. Because if the mind is undisturbed, one can then respond with love, compassion, and wisdom. In other words, skillfully. In this way, one may still get the desired outcome, but one's means by which one gets that outcome is skillful. And we are therefore habituating ourselves to skillful behavior, to wholesome behavior, rather than continuing our habituation to afflicted behavior, unskillful behavior. So this is the difference. The quality of mind under whose influence we respond. The most skillful response to when things don't go how we want them to is one of patience. And again, this is most easy to see in relation to others, but also in terms of just our life in general, or our own way of thinking, our own inner turmoil. When things don't go the way we want, to respond with patience. So the meaning of patience is that one's mind is undisturbed. Because if the mind is undisturbed, one can think clearly. One is not afflicted. So, for example, if someone is acting against our wishes, if one has developed the meditations presented earlier, one values them, one cares for them, one wants the best for them, then one will be holding them close, and one will easily be able to have a mind dominated with love and compassion. This is possible because the mind is patient. And because one's mind is patient and loving and compassionate, because you value this person you're interacting with, you can then think clearly and use your intelligence or wisdom. And by thinking clearly, because your mind is not afflicted, you can respond in a skillful manner. So again, what is being emphasized here is the quality of mind by which we respond, not necessarily whether we are asking them to change their behavior or not, but the quality of the mind through which we respond to them. Last two lines. Though longing for happiness, in their confused ignorance, they destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So again, we all want to be happy. We all want to abide with a joyful, peaceful mind. But we do not clearly recognize the causes for happiness. Invariably, we think by managing our external material conditions, happiness will come. So, and therefore, thinking that the dominant cause of my happiness is the material world, anything material, we then, with this exaggeration, we then put misplaced energy into gaining material comforts. This all too often comes with unethical behavior, taking advantage of others, deceiving others, perhaps even illegal behavior, defrauding others, stealing from others. But certainly, unethical behavior is all too common. And the result of this isn't happiness. Because no matter what one does to one's, how one manipulates or controls or develops one's material world, that cannot lead to lasting happiness. Moreover, where one is becoming known for being unethical, this will have a negative impact on our relationships with others. People won't really like us, they won't really trust us. They may still need to interact with us, they may still need to be polite to us, but they won't trust us. Therefore, we'll be separated from others, alone. Or if we commit illegal behavior, we may well end up imprisoned, and then our reputation is destroyed. So what we see here is that fault again is our method, our technique, that we think that this various activity will lead to happiness, but it just leads to further suffering. So what is required to achieve the happiness that we desire, to be free of suffering and problems, is to come to understand and then engage in the faultless method to achieve happiness. At the very least, what we do should be ethical. And the judge for whether something is ethical or not is whether it brings harm or not, whether it brings harm to oneself or to others, now or in the future. So this is how we overcome confused ignorance. I'll read the verse again. Though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. They're longing for happiness in their confused ignorance. They destroy their own happiness as if it were an enemy. So this confused ignorance is whereby one doesn't really know or is confused about the causes of happiness. And therefore, one engages in activity thinking, this will bring me my desired result, happiness, but it does not. So this is what we need to come to know and come to recognize the faultless method and live in accordance with that. At the very least, it should be ethical, not bring harm to others or ourselves. In these first two lines again, though beings long to be rid of suffering, they run directly towards suffering itself. So in particular here, in terms of the response of anger, anger can never lead to happiness. We can never transform our outer world so that it is in accordance with our wishes at all times. Our moods change, our wishes change, and to expect others to always act in accordance with our wishes in that moment is ridiculous. Likewise, our mind is often untamed, doing its own thing, and to expect our mind to always be the way we want it, this is not going to happen. We need to have a different response, not one of frustration, annoyance, or anger. And Shantideva says further on this point. So this we covered earlier this year in the 12th verse of the 5th chapter. Beings with untamed minds equal space. They cannot possibly all be eradicated, but subduing this mind of anger alone equates to subduing all enemies. So I'll read this 12th verse of the 5th chapter again. Beings with untamed minds equal space. They cannot possibly all be eradicated, but subduing this mind of anger alone equates to subduing all enemies. This then is stating very clearly that we cannot change the minds of others. We can, though, change our own mind. By subduing our own mind of anger, no one will upset us. It will be as if we have no enemies. It will be as if no one is talking badly to us. No one is acting unkindly towards us because of subduing our own mind. When our mind is well trained, and to whomever we encounter, whatever they are saying or doing, our response is one of patience, then we will respond with love, compassion, and wisdom. And it'll be as if we have no enemies, as if there is no one acting unkindly towards us. So therefore, the only response that leads to happiness is love and compassion. To summarize what we've looked at in this 3rd verse, we need to come to recognize that the afflictions are the cause of all suffering, and the afflictions are what prevent us from experiencing happiness. Therefore, we need to be on guard against the afflictions at all times. Whomever we are with, whatever we are doing, we need to be on guard against their afflictions. And when they arise, eradicate them. Skilled meditators, no matter what they are doing, they are aware of their mental process. So for them, when we see in all actions, I'll examine my own mind, whether they're talking to others, they're engaging in various physical activities, they are aware of their mental process, and thereby can keep their mind free of their afflictions. They are able to do this because they are skilled meditators. They've developed deep habituation to watching their mind. They're not so involved with what's happening around them. They're primarily focused on what's arising within. But without being such a skilled meditator, that is difficult to do. But it's not possible yet to do. So therefore, the technique that we should apply is to take care of our mind from the outset. So at the beginning of the day, to establish a firm and genuine motivation for the day ahead. And to the extent that this is a firm and genuine motivation, it will have an impact throughout the day. And if one can, from time to time in the day, recall that motivation, that will help keep it fresh. So if in the morning one sets a motivation that today I will only be of benefit, I will not bring harm to others. And this is because I value others. You do the meditations as mentioned before, developing an appreciation for others, recognizing how they have shown us so much kindness, their various activities, even if they have no idea who I am, they bring benefit to me. Develop thereby an appreciation for them, a valuing of them, recognizing that at a fundamental level, we are all the same. Then, develop that further. May all beings have happiness. May they be free of suffering. In particular, think about that in relation to those you are going to come into contact with that day. Developing the wish, may they be happy. May they be free of problems and difficulties. You develop this well within yourself. Then, later, when you are interacting with others, that motivation, if it's still present, will have an impact. And if now you are meeting with someone that morning you have meditated on, may they be happy, may they be free of problems, and now they're talking to you in an unkind manner, either to you or about someone else, then in dependence on that meditation, the thought may well arise. Your mind is disturbed right now. May you be happy. May you be free of the afflictions. And in this way, you yourself are guarding your mind. So I encourage you to take this approach, because this is within our grasp, it is within our means, but it requires you developing a strong and sincere meditation and keeping it fresh throughout the day. So the meditations that you are developing here are meditations of love and compassion that we've spoken about, which gets developed into bodhicitta. This incorporates aspects of the mind of generosity, in that it's a wish to give of yourself to others, to be of benefit to others. And now it's also taking the light, or the hue perhaps, the hue of ethical restraint, not wanting to harm others. So wanting to benefit others, which is an expression of love and compassion, and not wanting to harm others, ethics, that's also an expression of love and compassion. So we see how the 6 perfections are starting to be cultivated within, although they haven't been mentioned explicitly. They are being cultivated within. Notice when we move through this short text, the 6 perfections will all be found here. So then, thank you. We can conclude there for this morning. Thank you.